I've gone through all my boxes of seeds and selected which ones I'm going to grow this year. And I've gone through all my gardening catalogs and chosen the new varieties that I'm going to grow this year. And the result is this box. These seed packets represent the plants that are going to grow in my garden. And while I would love to start them all today, that's just not realistic, because now I need to plan the proper dates for each of these seed packets to find their way into my garden. Join me today as I show you how to plan when to sow your seeds. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott. And while a lot of gardeners don't enjoy the process of garden planning, it really is important. It begins by choosing what plants we want to grow in our garden. And then it moves to choosing the specific varieties and getting the seed packets that will go in our garden. And then a common problem arises. We finally have these seed packets in hand and we want to get to planting. Well, there's some steps that need to be taken before these seeds go in the ground, because we can't start these seeds all at the same time. Each of these seeds have a very specific date that is best if we want them to grow in our garden successfully. Take these Kellogg's breakfast tomato seeds, for example. Looking at the seed packet, it tells me that I should start these seeds indoors 6 weeks before the last frost. If I compare that to this cayenne long thin pepper, it suggests that I start these seeds indoors 8 to 10 weeks before the last frost date. This Waltham 29 broccoli says to start indoors 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost date. And these Lincoln peas tell me to start in place 4 to 6 weeks before the last frost date. So the first three are started indoors, this one is started outdoors, and they all have different times that we're supposed to start the seeds. So how do you keep track of all of this? Well, that's where the garden planning comes into practice, because it's obvious we can't start all these seeds on the same date or even all in the same location, either indoors or outdoors. We need to go through each of these packets and try to figure out just exactly when the best time is to start. In an earlier video, I showed how I take a calendar and enter a date on a calendar when I'm going to sow my seeds based on that recommendation that's on the seed packet. This is a good way to take all this information that's on the seed packets and put it into practice. I can look at my calendar and choose the specific dates that I'm either sowing indoors or outdoors. But there's limited information here. This is just an action point that I can take to get these seeds growing. What if I want more? Well, then I move to my spreadsheet. And this includes a lot more information when it comes to starting my seeds. I've started a spreadsheet with a lot more information that's helpful. I list all of the plants that I'm planting in my garden and then the respective date that I'll start sowing. But then how many of the seeds I'm going to sow, whether they're indoors or outdoors, what kind of container I'm going to use, if I have to transplant outdoors, when I'm going to do that and where I'm going to do that, and then if I'm going to do any succession planting to keep the seeds growing through the season. This spreadsheet that I set up represents the information that I find important when I start seeds. You could easily modify this however you choose with the information you find most important. I start, of course, with all of the plants listed, and that can change from year to year. So this template is one of those kind of things that I work on electronically, and every year I have a new file that represents the plants I'm going to grow. When it comes to the date, it starts with the date that's recommended on the seed packet. But from experience, I know that I can get some late freezes here in Colorado. So I add a 2-week buffer. If the seed packet suggests starting 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost date, well, I take that buffer into account and I start at the 8-week point rather than at the 6-week point. And as to the amount of seeds that I'm going to start, too often, and I've been so guilty of this over the years, gardeners will start more seeds than they really need. So if I want to grow this long, thin cayenne pepper, this packet is loaded with seeds, might as well plant as many of them as I can, and then we end up with too many plants. Well, to avoid that, I like to start with a plan. How many plants I think I'm going to need of that particular type, and when I sow the seeds, I set the appropriate tray or pot aside for that many seeds. And that container makes a difference. I start some of my seeds in trays, I start some of my seeds in pots, I start some of my seeds in the beds that they're actually going to be growing in. And so that's why I have additional columns for transplanting and the date that I'm planning to transplant from the pot into the garden. Again, allowing that buffer so that the soil has warmed up enough, assuming I have a late cold snap. And then the final location. So for me, some of my plants are going into the greenhouse, some of them are going into garden beds, some of them are going into my green stock vertical planter. And then that last column for succession planting, some of these seeds aren't just going to be started once. I'm going to grow them over a period of time. So lettuce, for instance, I'll start some lettuce seeds in my green stock. I'll also start some lettuce seeds outside in my garden beds. And then 2 weeks later, I'm gonna do some more of those same lettuce seeds. Because lettuce grows so quickly, when you have succession planting by staggering the planting dates like that, you can have a harvest over a longer period, over a period of weeks, depending on how often you do the succession planting. As a basic template, I use the spreadsheet with all the plants listed alphabetically. But to be a tool that I can use for starting my seeds, I adjust it and list everything by sowing date. And so the calendar tells me to take action on a particular date, but this sheet is the plan that tells me exactly what I'm going to start, how many of them I'm going to start, and what I'm going to use as far as a container and a location. And this plan can also be as specific as you want it to be. I'm growing a lot of hot peppers this year. So I'm starting some of my hot peppers on February 15th. I'm planning on doing 24 seeds indoors in a tray. And on the 7th of June, I'll be moving them into the greenhouse. I'm growing other hot peppers, different varieties, that I won't start until the 1st of March. Also about 24 plants starting in a tray, and I'll be moving those into outdoor beds on the 7th of June. This single sheet is my entire seed starting plan, and this is going to be down in my grow room. Right now, I have things pretty generic. It just says hot pepper. That's because I know exactly what hot pepper varieties I'm going to grow. I have this box from Pepper Joe's of all of those hot peppers, so when it comes time to start, those are the seeds I'm going to do. But for the rest of the plants, like the different peas and the different beans, there's a couple different approaches that I take. One is to further expand this spreadsheet, or, and the one I actually prefer, is to take this box of seeds and actually organize them based on when I'm going to start that seed. Right now, this box is set up alphabetically. On this side, it runs from basil to peas, and on this side, it runs from peppers to zucchini. And so, checking with my calendar or checking with my spreadsheet, I know, for instance, that on March 15th, I'm going to be starting my broccoli seeds. I can go to this box where everything's in alphabetical order, find the Calabrese green sprouting broccoli, and start these seeds. And I've done it this way for years. But I've also reorganized the box to put them not in alphabetical order, but by the order that they're going to be started. So for these long, slim cayenne peppers or this early jalapeno, I know that they're being started on the 1st of March. So why not put them right up front? When it comes time to start my seeds, I just go in the order that I've put the seed packets, and that order is the date that they need to be started. This method is helpful not only because of the hot pepper example that I already gave, but for something like beans. I'm going to be growing some bush beans, starting the seeds on the 21st of May in a pot. I'm going to be growing some vining beans starting on the 3rd of June in a garden bed. This is just a few of the ways that I use to try to keep everything in order and everything on a plan to get my seeds started. You can use this as a basic guideline. Feel free to make all the modifications that you choose. And most importantly, start your seeds and keep track of when you're starting and how well they do. Annotate that in your garden journal, and then next year you can make adjustments to the list as needed because you're developing that gardening experience. To learn more about growing seeds and how I do it, go ahead and check out one of these videos next. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.